Hey guys, welcome to episode 6 of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast network. We've got a great guest lined up today, Kyle Kirkwood. Before we get to him, just a friendly reminder, if you're enjoying the content that we're bringing you here, make sure that you are subscribing, liking, sharing it with friends. Get some discussion going in the comments section. If there's anything that you guys want to see more of, potential future guests coming up, as well as even in segments of the sports industry we might not have covered yet that you'd like some more in-depth dives into, please let us know. Kyle Kirkwood is a former Usports player playing football at the University of Ottawa, who actually went on to get drafted into the CFL by the BC Lions. Now, after suffering an unfortunate career-ending injury, he actually transitioned into the sports industry, where he's held several positions here in Ottawa, working not only for the Ottawa Senators in their community outreach, their minor hockey and tournaments programs, but also he's now with the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, also known as OSEG, and they oversee the CFL Redblacks, the OHL's Ottawa 67s, and all the other teams that operate out of TD Place down at Lansdowne. So he can definitely speak from a variety of areas, not only from the sales, but from the actual hands-on running of events, and actually the journey of a player, not only through the amateur ranks, but up to the professional ranks as well. So a wealth of knowledge, a great guy. I really think you'll enjoy the interview. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Kyle Kirkwood. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast. Joining me today is Kyle Kirkwood. Kyle, how are you doing, sir?
Doing very well, Mr. Skinner. How are we doing today?
We're doing good over here. I think first and foremost, congratulations are obviously in order. You've got another little Kirkwood joining the clan over there. How's everyone doing?
Yeah, thank you very much. Everybody's doing great. Everybody's doing great. You know, just obviously a weird time to be bringing a new life form into the world, but definitely want to give a shout out to everybody at the Montfort Hospital for making everything as seamless as possible and letting us bring our little girl home healthy and happy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, all the frontline medical staff there, I don't know how the heck they're doing it, but, they're definitely doing heroes work where you and I are sitting here in a basement having a chat about sports. So they're the real heroes these days for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe speaking about kids there, so you've now had two. So is the older one starting to show any interest in sports at all, or are you trying to steer her toward any particular sports?
It's still at the, we don't really know what she's really going to be interested in long term. I mean, she loves music, she loves reading books, so hopefully she's an academic first, and then she's starting to show a little bit of interest in things like basketball and soccer. So, I mean, if that sticks, great. If not, then perfectly happy with her being the brains of the operation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're already planting the seed of student athlete first there, eh?
That's right.
Well, who knows? If she likes the music, you could be going from the gridiron to dance recitals pretty soon there. So,
you know what? It's a very smooth transition with that. You got to have good feet for both. So, I mean, as long as the stamina holds up, I think we'll be okay.
Awesome. Well, speaking of the gridiron there, so obviously your background being mostly football, you were playing at the Usport level for Ottawa U. And, what we're trying to sort of get across to some of our listeners and our athletes there is some tangible tips and tricks as far as, making transitions smooth and, obviously going from the high school level to the university level is a huge transition in and of itself.
Yeah.
Probably on your high school team, you were probably one of the biggest, strongest, fastest, all that. And suddenly you get to the U Sport level and it's a bunch of people who used to be the biggest, strongest, fastest person. So
right.
Were there any adjustments that you made that sort of helped you along the way in that first year in particular?
Yeah, definitely. From a work ethic perspective, you get accustomed to working out a certain way in high school. You don't really have, as much feedback from your coaches and from personal trainers, unless, obviously you have the ability to have that while you're in your high school years. But, just from a looking at how to work out effectively and how to really build your muscles, to a point of not only being strong, but being again, I go back to the stamina content, but you want to make sure that you're very well rounded in that regard. And just from a dieting perspective too, that was a huge eye opener for me. I mean, you're in high school, you don't really have a meal plan, set. Your parents might be working shift work. You come home and you throw like 4 pogos in the microwave, and that's your dinner for the night. So definitely can't do that when you're in university, if you really want to maximize your ability to do that. So just understanding the proper supplements to take, just understanding the proper way to work out, what the best schedule is, for sleep. And then obviously from a dieting perspective, it's huge in that regard of making that transition from high school to the university level.
Yeah, and you touched on a really good point there as well too, and especially the offensive and defensive linemen who just look at photos of Yanda, who just retired last season, 2 years ago, and he looks like half the man that he used to be, right? Yeah. So is there anything in there that was there a certain point in time where obviously you're a teenager, you can throw pretty much whatever kind of junk you want into your body, and it's all part of quote unquote bulking up and all that. There was there a certain point where you started to notice, okay, you know what, I can't get away with as you said, 4 pogos and a half a pizza and all that there?
I think you really kind of hit that realization when you're really focusing on doing it for a long period of time. So I mean, obviously, when I grew up, much like a lot of kids are, I played a lot of different sports. So obviously, you're kind of splitting time between each of them and not really focusing too much on one. And then as soon as you get to that one point where you really want to make that your goal. So I mean, when I got to the point of, okay, well, I'm getting a little bit too big to play hockey. My long-term badminton goals aren't really going to pay off, if I really want to focus on a career in that. So I'm joking, by the way. Badminton's a great sport. But when football really started to take precedent on what really was going to be an impactful thing for me long term, and for getting me into school and allowing me to pursue a potential career in playing sports, I really had to focus on that. And I think I hit that realization when I was about 16 years old. So about grade 11. And I know that, you see it a lot now where, kids aren't playing, as many sports anymore. They're really focusing on one thing. And, I'm a big advocate on, participating in multiple sports, obviously, developing different skill sets and different muscle fibers and whatnot. But, once you get to that point, there's always going to be that drop dead, area where it's, you have to make a decision as what I'm going to focus on, what am I going to focus most of my attention on? I can't, keep doing, AAA hockey with high school football, with city basketball, with city lacrosse. You can't do all of those things because they all coincide with each other. And then you're always, you're taking away, something from something else. So it's kind of like a rob Peter to pay Paul scenario. So, I mean, I think for me, and I know it's different now because obviously I went through that a little bit of time ago. But I know that for me especially, it really hit when I was about 15, 16 years old, and I really started to evaluate where my best option was from playing sports from a long-term perspective, and just years of high school to really get myself prepared both mentally and physically to make that jump to the university football level.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you maybe even say to some of those parents who are thinking, okay, Timmy's got to start specializing earlier on because he sees Johnny and all his other friends, and they almost have the mentality of, okay, well, if he doesn't specialize early on, he's going to be falling behind and he won't get picked for that select team or that all-star team. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually do. I really don't think that people have to really put their kids focused on one thing for 12 months a year, because over time, the majority of kids are going to fall out of love with the sport because they're just doing it all the time, and it becomes more of a chore than it is actually, an enjoyment for them. So, I mean, when I'm talking to parents, and like obviously, getting into the coaching realm after I was done playing, conversation that I had a lot with these parents is, when's the best time to really put that focus on, and what should I be doing in the off season? It's like, hey, let your kids still be kids as long as they can, because again, kids are being asked to grow up a lot quicker than we were back in the day. So, I mean, let them be kids as long as possible, and let them play as many things as possible too. Because I mean, for me, going from high school athlete to the university level to be exclusively a football player, the thing that helped me out the most was, my hand-eye coordination from playing hockey and lacrosse, and my footwork that I gained from playing basketball. So I mean, I don't make it as far as I do at the position that I made it at if I don't have all those skill sets in tow. So I mean, when I talk to parents, it's more of, what, if little Johnny is playing, football 12 months a year, that's great. He's only working out his football brain. When you have your little, son or daughter who's specializing in a multitude of different things, one, it becomes more fun for them to step on the field, and they're never going to lose that passion for, again, if let's just use football as an example. If the thing that they like the most out of everything that they're doing is football, they're always going to put more of an effort into that football, whether they, intend to or not. It's just a natural thing that comes through your body where you give more of what you have for something that you're passionate about. So again, I really am, a big advocate on, not specializing in a sport too early. There's going to be plenty of time for you to do that, and especially with all the things that kids have, at their availability right now, with the technology that that people have with coding, and even, like, I go back to what my daughter is interested in with music. I mean, I would feel horrible if I was making her spend all of her attention doing one thing that she didn't like and taking away from the thing that actually makes her get up in the morning, which is listening to music. So, that's one thing that I'm very, very passionate about. And I would actually tell every parent that, has their kids in any type of sport is, don't put too much on them too early, because they will fall out of love with it over time.
For sure. So, and working with parents, obviously, this sort of generation gets painted with broad strokes, and the term helicopter parent sort of gets thrown around a bit. Looking back on maybe your journey there, how involved were your parents as far as, helping you academically, picking out courses, signing you up for all sorts of camps and all that, or was it mostly you driven? Like, hey, there's this thing coming up, I'd really be interested in it. So were they more hands-on, or sort of let you follow your passions?
Yeah, I think it was actually a very good mix of both, which is why, it ended up working out so well. I think early on when I first got into sports, it was more of my parents pushing me into different things to try it. And then if I liked it, then you keep going with that. And again, that really set me up for a good regiment of how to, time manage, how to prioritize different things, even when you're a child. And then once I got to a certain age where I'm starting to be more cognizant of the things that really, impact my day, I'm able to make those decisions as to what's important to me. So now it's more of a hands-off approach, and I'm just going to be a fan. So, the word helicopter parent, I mean, obviously is thrown around a lot in the sports world. And again, I'll always, have the conversation with people, it's, again, let your kids be kids. And, the best thing that you can do is just to show up. That's really the best thing that you can do. If your kid wants you to get involved, then hey, get involved as much as you can and as much as you're able to, because that's one thing that you can never get back, is that time with your kid. And that's really what being a parent, in sports is all about, is spending time with your child and with other kids. Because again, you're never going to have that time back once you move on to, the post-adolescent part of your child's life. So, again, helicopter parents, it's a term that I really don't like. And again, I think it's more of just be there, show up, and, do what you can to, make your child's experience the best that it can. Because again, we talk about falling out of love with something. Well, that can happen, really quickly if a parent is pushing and pushing and pushing, and the kid just has enough of it. And just to get his parent off of his back, or her back, they'll just quit altogether.
Yeah, yeah. And, obviously we're talking about some pretty special moments that are shared with parents and through sports and all that. I would have to imagine a pretty special moment that you got to share with your parents was when you were actually drafted to the CFL there. Can you
Yeah.
talk briefly about sort of what that process was like? And people sort of see on online the NFL draft just happened and all that, and obviously it was a little bit different
Yeah.
this year, but what was your
Yeah.
your experience like going through that?
To be perfectly honest, it was really it was really unique for me because, I was able to actually share that day with my dad. And, I know that it meant a lot to him to be a part of that because he was such a big part of that, of my entire football journey coming up. So, I mean, being able to sit in the room and be on the phone with, with the coaches and general managers that were calling me over the day, that was just a really cool experience to, go through that with him. And obviously my mom wasn't able to come down, but, the first person that called me as soon as my name was called was my mother. So, I mean, being able to really experience that through them. And I mean, I think, and I look back on it now, I really do think it meant more to them than it did for me, as much as it did for me. Like, that was a life-changing experience that I'll never forget. It's a story that I'll always have to tell my kids and grandkids. But, I could see just, with the expressions that my dad had, and, the tone that I heard over the phone with my mom, that meant so much to them. And, just the pride that came out in that day. Like, I don't think I really understood what, what having pride in your kid was until I actually saw that. Obviously my parents have been proud of me and my brother, our entire lives, but that particular moment was something that really stood out to me as, this is a really cool experience.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and that's obviously something that you guys will be able to look back fondly on
Yeah,
for quite a long time there as well
that's right.
too.
Hmm.
So part of the journey as well. So we mentioned earlier there, right? Student athlete. So you actually not only graduated from Ottawa U, but you actually then went back to school and went to Algonquin College for sports business as well too.
Yes.
What was the driving factor in going and getting a second diploma on top of your existing degree already?
I think it was a combination of a couple of things. One, obviously, suffering a career-ending injury and kind of taking, what my driving goal was off the table. It's really okay, well, what do I do now? I really don't know. So what's the one thing that people always do when they don't know what they want to do with their lives? They go back to school. But then I always had an interest in the business side of things, and obviously Algonquin offers a specialized course that involves the sports element in it as well. So I figured, with my existing degree that I had, with my experience that I've had from a personal and professional level, playing with the BC Lions and, as short as it was, but experiencing that, I think I could really, utilize those assets, go back and go through this program and, get some of the skills that, maybe I'm lacking, for when I want to get into my professional career after this is done. And realistically, I think it was just my passion and my love for, for sports and the sport industry in general that really kind of drove me to that. And kind of mixed two things that I really, I enjoy and that I really, have been a very big driving factor for me, which is the sports side of things is, mixed with the business side.
Yeah. And maybe for those that are listening that are trying to sort of weigh their options, they might be, trying to decide, do I go to university here in Canada? Do I go down south to the States? Do I go to a community college, JUCO route, whatever? What were some of the maybe tangible differences that you could speak to as far as, the bigger sort of classroom settings at the
Mhm.
university level versus, the smaller group settings and more hands-on learning at the college level?
Yeah, and before I get into the long spiel that I'll get into, I think the easiest way to define it is, you have to be comfortable with where you're going to be, because this is where you're going to spend the next 2 to 4 years of your life. And if you're not comfortable and you don't, and you're not going to really enjoy everything about the experience, and it's not just the classroom sizes, but it's the campus lifestyle, it's the city, it's everything that comes with that. That's such a big factor in what drives people to different schools. And I mean, if first and foremost, if that is completely off the table, where you really aren't thinking about that, that needs to be the first prioritization for you when you're making those decisions on whether to go to the college route, down to the down to the States at a bigger school, or staying in Canada at one of the larger schools that we have and from the university level. um, and I think obviously it all kind of comes back to that. And realistically, the two things I can take from both the university setting as well as the college setting is the university setting. I mean, University of Ottawa is kind of a unique campus where it really does encompass the entire downtown Ottawa area. So I mean, it really provided me with the ability to experience what a bigger city was like coming from Sudbury, and really kind of engulfing myself with that, as well as being a part of these larger auditoriums that I'm not used to, and really kind of putting more of that time management and holding myself accountable for getting all these things done. going to the college level, which is, again, it's a fantastic experience if people, really don't understand what a college, classroom is. You hit the nail on the head when you said it's a very condensed setting where you get more hands-on. And, I couldn't agree more with that, because, you're sitting in a classroom of 20 people, and realistically, you can raise your hand and ask a question to the professor at any point during his lecture or anything like that. Whereas when you're at the university level, you're sitting in an auditorium with, 300-400 people sometimes. And try raising your hand in that setting and see how much how much more comfortable you are. So I mean, they both provide very, very good experiences for what you're looking for. And again, if you feel you're going to need the more hands-on approach of going to the college level, then I encourage you to go to the college level. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you feel that you can hold yourself accountable and you can maintain that that level of accountability from the university level, then hey, you know what, go to the university level and experience that, because again, there's so many positives from that too, and you can learn kind of in your own way, which is really unique, that you don't really get from the high school portion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say that you're bang on as far as your assessment there too, because I've done both routes as well too, both the university and the college, and they are two very unique experiences. And knowing your learning styles and your skill sets is paramount as far as making sure that it's an easy transition there. So
that's right.
Definitely need to do a little bit of a self-assessment before you make that decision.
That's right.
Yeah. So you end up graduating from good old Algonquin College there, and
so I will put a caveat to that. I actually didn't graduate. I finished 2/3 of the program, and then I ended up getting a job placement right out of the program. So
okay.
So I don't want to put on any misnomers there.
Yeah. For those that are doing audits of our YouTube page there and fact checking it there, he's a few credits short there.
Yeah, that's right.
But that actually brings us to the sort of point in time where our paths actually ended up crossing there, and doing some work with the Ottawa Senators and their minor hockey programs, and spending some long hours over the course of a few weekends there, putting on some tournaments in the nation's capital. And without going into too much detail, because we could be here literally all day swapping stories, but what were some of the key takeaways that you had from that experience and sort of your first tangible sports industry sort of job, really?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the thing that I think sticks out for everybody that gets involved from a first-time perspective into a sports industry is it is not what you think it's going to be. Obviously, from coming up and playing sports and coming and being able to do so at a high level, you learn that there's not a lot of hours in the day because your time is so valuable and it's always booked doing something. And when you work in a sports environment, it is literally the exact same thing, but in a completely different regard. So, I mean, when you're coming through and you think that, hey, everything is going to be, awesome, I love sport, I love this, you better be prepared to really, push that love of that for the first, I want to say 6 months of what your job is going to be, because it's really going to test a lot of that, because those long hours can wear on people and those long days can wear on people. And again, when you're doing something like we were in the hockey environment, I mean, it kind of feels like Groundhog Day sometimes, where you're waking up and you don't even know what day it is, and it's just the same thing over and over again. But you just get up and you keep doing it, and even if it is on autopilot, you just got to push through it. And I think once you get past that point of, okay, well, I really tested my enjoyment of this, through the 6 months. And if I still enjoy it and I still like coming into work every day, then it really is something for you. So, I mean, that was really the biggest takeaway that I had from it. My expectations of getting involved with something like that were, I don't want to say that they were completely off base, because again, going through that from a university perspective, but really did kind of catch me a bit off guard when I understood the full grasp of what the job entailed and kind of what the industry demanded of you.
Yeah, and you almost kept track of the days of the week based on what tournament was going on.
That's exactly it. What month is it? Oh, it's July. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's time for the AAA shootout. Okay, it must be near Canada Day here. Yeah. So now you've sort of gotten back to your roots a little bit and started getting more heavily involved in also the coaching side of football as well too. So,
Right.
what are some of maybe the differences that you're noticing at the youth level today versus when you were coming up in the system, and whether that's play style or just attitudes or developments or scheme systems, whatever.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go back to your comment earlier about talking about kids specializing in a specific sport. I think that's become more of a reality in what we live in the sports world today, is that parents and kids want to be specialized in a specific sport from the get-go. And again, long gone are the days where everybody just went out and did everything, and then eventually you kind of fall into place, and you kind of end up where you are. But I think that's the biggest difference in today's realm of sports, is that you might talk to a kid, and he's telling you that he's been playing football. So say he's 16 years old, he's been playing football for 10 years. Oh, what other sports do you play? Well, I don't play any other sports. And that to me is always a really shocking revelation, because again, I'm not used to, I wasn't used to that when I was growing up, because if I didn't, if I wasn't on the football field, I was in the arena. If I wasn't in the arena, I was on the basketball court. If I wasn't on the basketball court, I was running track. There's a lot of different things that that came up that really made it so that I was always doing something. Whereas today it's you're doing whatever sport you're specializing in for 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and then the rest of it is just going to school. So that's really the biggest thing for me. Then again, I want to say that the kids today are also and I'll say this with a grain of salt because it kind of hurts me a little bit, but they're more athletic than we were a little bit ago, because again, there's more specialized training from a weightlifting or from a dry land training perspective as well. So I think that that's a really big reality that I think a lot of people kind of don't look at when you go to a football field and you're watching kids run, and it's like, okay, that kid is definitely running a sub 4.540 at 16 years old, which you never saw, or maybe you saw from one or two kids in the 10 or 15 years. But I think that's really big eye opener for anybody who's getting into coaching now, is that there's always going to be two or three of those kids that really just wow you with how athletic they are, because they've been doing this specialized training from X amount of age.
Yeah. You can almost it's almost as though you look at old tapes, and the one that always pops out is the Andy Reid in the punt pass and the competition there, and you look at that and it's like, okay, wow, the kids used to be huge back in the day, but now, as you say, they seem to be faster and more, they can run better routes, and it's less sort of backyard football. It's more system based and whatnot. Do you think there's maybe an overemphasis, or maybe there's been an overcorrection on maybe professionalizing youth sports in the last 5 to 10 years?
I do, for sure. I think that there's a lot of complicated things that are going on out there right now that are kind of giving people the sense of false hope that this is going to get your kid down to the professional level. And again, it's professionalizing the amateur part of sport. So again, I won't get too far into that, because that's a conversation that we can have for 10 days in a row, and we can talk about different points every day. But what I'll just really emphasize to anybody watching this is just make sure you really do your homework, and you understand what's going to be good for you and your family's development throughout this whole process. And again, it's not just about whatever child is going into a sport. It's about the parents getting involved and understanding a full aspect of it too. Because if a kid comes to you and says, I want to take part in this camp, it costs $700, and I'm going down to Syracuse for a week to do it. Okay, well, who's taking you? Oh, well, this guy who I met working out, he runs a camp out of this. And it's like, okay, well, let me get to know who this person is first and foremost. Or if that's not going to happen, then I want to get involved, and I'll come down with you, so that way I can really see what this is all about. And if it's going to be the best thing for us long term from an educational purpose, from a and again, people always say that, well, I need to get eyes on me. I need to get scouts' eyes on me. Listen, if you are good enough and you are talented enough, word of mouth travels faster than any highlight tape will, and you will get noticed by somebody. So again, just the education part of that is really what I emphasize to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's applicable to not just football, but just sports in general. It is,
Yeah.
you know, the best players, they don't do a lot of talking about themselves and how good they are. They let all the other people do all the talking. And like you say, word travels pretty fast about, oh, did you see this kid from Timbuktu? And, you know, the stuff that he's doing, he's insane. So, yeah, no, it's
Right.
a huge point for sure. Would you maybe say, you know, and obviously we've made huge leaps and bounds as far as safety and, you know, even recognizing concussion protocols and CTE and all of that stuff. So there's been a huge push on that education side of things. But if there were, say, a parent who was maybe on the fence about letting their kid into football, what would you say to them to sort of calm their nerves a little bit there?
Well, again, I think you said a little bit earlier, football has never really been safer from a coaching and a technique perspective. 15, 20 years ago, there really wasn't anything in place for coaches to go and get certified in order to step on the field to diagnose things like injuries and concussions, which are a huge portion of people's concerns today. So I think from that perspective, first and foremost, I think that's the biggest difference that, people can really expect to see. And then, from a secondary level, I mean, anybody who's on the fence about getting your kid into football, there are so many different levels of football that you can really focus on. So if you're hesitant to put your kid into contact, there are flag football options, there's touch football options. There are different things across. And again, I work closely with NCAFA being a part of OSEG. And I mean, NCAFA runs so many great programs in regards to, again, offering up touch, flag, tackle, and intro to tackle. Like they really do a great job at, categorizing all these things that, their slogan is our huddle includes everybody. And it really does. So anybody who is hesitant to do that, I mean, just go to one of the information sessions that, your boundary club will actually put on and get to know, the executive, what the core values are, what type of programs do they offer? Because again, if you really want to get your child involved into something, I mean, football really is the ultimate team game. And there's so many different aspects of football that really do go well beyond, the strapping on the helmet and shoulder pads and, and tackling everybody. So that's really something that I think people really need to be cognizant of, is that, it's not just the old school style of game where, you see on TV and guys are getting hit in the head all the time. Coaching has changed, safe contact has changed, tackling has changed. Yes, guys are getting bigger and stronger and faster, but at the end of the day, the equipment's evolving with that. Again, the coaching's evolving with that. And I think the actual variety is evolving with that too.
Yeah. So for those that are listening at home there, football is far from 2 hours of the Oklahoma drill going on nonstop.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. There are there are a lot of things that are not even allowed. You're not even allowed to do from an on-field portion right now than you were, 15, 20 years ago. So yes, you're not banging heads for 2 hours.
things have changed a little bit, eh?
Yes.
So you mentioned it just in your previous answer, obviously you're now working with OSEG, so the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group. For those that might not be familiar, what's sort of your role? What does a typical day look like for you in your new position?
Yeah, so the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group encompasses TD Place and as well as the franchises, the Ottawa Redblacks and the Ottawa 67s. So essentially what my job is and what my day-to-day looks like is, I kind of have a twofold role, where a portion of my role is centered around being a sales academy manager. So basically I'm a sales coach for all entry-level professionals who are looking to get into the sports industry. So I'm teaching them how to, sell effectively, how to utilize techniques to grow their personal and professional brand. And then the second part of my role is actually overseeing a lot of the youth football groups and the minor football programs that we run through the Ottawa Redblacks program. So, with that, I work closely with a group within CAFA, which is the National Capital Amateur Football Association, as well as the high schools locally, summer elite programs, the universities, anything that kind of falls under the amateur sport banner. So even up to Football Canada and the Ontario Football Association. or sorry, Ontario Football Alliance. Let me get that right.
Okay.
So working with, again, governing bodies as well as local community groups to try and grow the grassroots level of football, using the Redblacks brand and, really pushing that forward to making, again, youth football into the biggest entity that it can be.
Right on. So, I mean, obviously, regardless of sport, sales is always going to be a huge factor. At the end of the day, you gotta sell season tickets, you gotta get butts in seats, and all of
That's
that.
right.
Aside from sales or having a sales background, are there any particular skills that you feel are really in demand right now, whether it's at OSEG or just across the industry in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, people are really looking at trades a little bit differently now, because obviously there's a lot of emphasis on the specialization portion of, what is an essential job, what's a non-essential job. So, I mean, we're talking earlier in the conversation about sitting in our basements, talking through a computer about, about sports. And, I think when people are looking at, from a wide variety perspective, I think you're looking at a lot of those frontline jobs. And again, people are getting a lot more adoration for those, and people are getting a lot more understanding of what they do in the day to day. And I think that's really putting an emphasis on, this is what we need more of. So, getting more of those people on the front lines and getting more of those people, at the ready, because again, even if we don't go through another one of these situations that we're currently in, it's better to have more trained professionals in that regard that can actually help us get through that. And obviously, living in a country like we're in, we have such a good healthcare system. I think that it's actually, very easy to do. From an OSEG perspective, I think that, realistically, I think everybody, it's kind of like, that, the bike tire, every spoke needs to be intact in order for that bike tire to really roll effectively. So, I mean, when I look at it from what's essential and what's not essential from that perspective, I really don't think that we can operate, effectively if we don't have everybody working and doing what they're doing. Sales needs marketing, marketing needs events, events needs corporate partnerships needs operations. Like, everybody kind of goes through it all together, and we really do, utilize each other's skill sets, from a day-to-day basis. So that's really the biggest thing that I think, again, a lot of people will look at and say, well, sales is what, brings people in. Yes, at the end of the day, sales is what drives money through the organization. However, corporate partnerships also, goes out and gets those sponsorship dollars that we need heavily, that we want to advertise during games. And if we don't have an event staff to actually schedule things and book those events, then our sales staff is actually, not as capable of doing our jobs, because we don't have things, from an events perspective that can be run on a day-to-day thing. So, I mean, I'll go back to our Senators days. I mean, we were kind of, encompassed with wearing every hat imaginable. We're scheduling the events, we're booking the vendors, we're, managing the budgets, we're doing all these things, we're selling teams on coming to play in these tournaments, and then we're running the tournaments on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's the really, unique part of what OSEG really does. And I know that the Senators do it from a certain perspective too. But I really do think that OSEG and a lot of the other professional sports teams need all of those elements in order to function properly.
Yeah, everyone's got to be pulling their own weight for sure. So, obviously, with COVID now going on, CFL season is up in limbo. So obviously, there's some sweeping changes and unanswerable questions right now. But have there been any sort of pivots that you guys have done in the interim, as far as remaining engaged with season ticket holders or community outreach, any of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a pretty big restriction on doing a lot of those things that we would like to do and get out in the community. But I think, if you follow the Redblacks or the 67s on any type of social media platform, you'll see, the things that they're doing to keep people engaged. From a sales perspective, obviously we're making sure that all of our existing buyers, whether it be season ticket members, group members, or anything of that nature, I think everybody is kind of being kept in the loop from what we can really do from a sales perspective. So everybody's not going to get surprised, or nobody's going to get surprised when it comes down to that. So I mean, I think that we're doing a pretty good job at keeping in touch with everybody in the community and making sure that they're up to date on everything that we're kind of going through, other than what they hear from Randy Ambrosi, from TSN, or reading online. And I think that really, the feedback that we've gotten from everybody in the Ottawa community, I mean, it's been nothing but positive. I think everybody really understands where we're at, and I think everybody understands, and I think everybody appreciates the type of involvement that we're actually putting out there. I mean, we're having our staff reach out to everybody on a daily basis. So we're trying to get through as many people as possible, so that way we can make everybody feel like they're a part of this, because they are. Everybody always says we're in this together. Well, again, a professional sports team doesn't work without the fans, and the fans are a vital and crucial part of everything that we're doing. So we need to make sure that we're keeping them in the loop as much as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's all this talk now about how do professional sports leagues move forward, and is there going to be a period of time where they are playing in empty stadiums, and how long is that a 3-month, 6-month, 2-year type thing? I mean, looking into sort of a crystal ball, so to speak here, and we won't hold you to any exact predictions there. I know that you've got a bit of sway over there, but I don't think you're setting the restrictions. So what kind of changes do you sort of envision, the next year of sports sort of looking like?
I really think it's too early to tell that, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think that we're going to get a sense of that looking at these leagues that are going to be starting up in the next, month or two, with the, the soccer leagues over in Europe, and really get a sense of where, they're going. Obviously, we know the Korean Baseball League is doing the, the no fans in the stands, and I think they're putting robots there to actually create crowd noise and whatnot.
Have you watched any Korean Baseball
I
League?
haven't, but I'm sure it's a very interesting, watch. But I think that's really going to, dictate what the landscape is long term, because obviously when you're looking at big, soccer leagues like they have over in Europe, that's really going to be interesting to see how they manage that. I mean, obviously you're starting to see in the States, UFC just had an event last weekend where, Florida has deemed it to be an essential service. So they were able to put on a show without fans in the stands. Now, I mean, I don't know if you watch UFC, or if this was the first time that you had checked it out, but it's a very different experience when you're looking at an event happening without fans there. I mean, you're hearing the breathing, you're hearing the punches, you're hearing
Joe Rogan breathing ringside.
That's right.
The athletes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, but it really gives a good indication of what that would look like from that perspective. I mean, obviously, football is such a different atmosphere that you really can't recreate it unless you have people there. But that being said, I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like, and I think that we're really just kind of waiting and seeing what what these other leagues can really put forward. And I know that people from our organization, as well as the CFL, are putting in countless amounts of hours trying to prepare for every scenario under the sun. So every stone is being turned, and I really think that whatever situation we come back in is going to be what's best for each team in the league long term.
Absolutely. And any final advice to maybe any athletes out there who are looking to sort of transition from their playing careers into maybe or sports business side? Anything you wish you had have maybe done differently, or things to make sure to check out?
Yeah, the biggest thing is jump in. Just go in. I mean, obviously you want to do your research, but if you have a passion for it and you want to pursue a career in sports, whether it's playing or not, you gotta be 100% committed to it. I think for the longest time I had always had it in my head that if I wasn't playing professional sports, then I was just going to get a regular 9-to-5 job somewhere. And I didn't really comprehend that until, the playing side of it was taken away from me, that, what, I could actually do this as a career. It just doesn't have to be on the field. And it took me a while to get used to that. So I think, the best thing I could tell people is, what, if you care enough about it and you really want to make it into something that you can do for the rest of your life, and just commit to it, jump in, and expect that it's going to be tough. Don't come in, with, hey, I'm going to, know everything within the first, 2 weeks that I'm there. There's so many things that you don't understand about the back end of any type of sport, whether it be amateur, whether it be professional, or what have you. So just come in, you need to have an open mind, and you need to be prepared for it to not be what you think it is. So, but once you get through that, if you're committed to it, you push through, then it actually becomes a very, very rewarding position.
Right on. Great advice. Where can people find you or learn more about any of the projects you might be working on? Anything you want to plug there?
Well, like I said, right now we're just kind of working through the COVID situation and what our plans are. But I mean, anybody who's looking to talk about any type of football or things regarding the Redblacks brand, the 67s brand, they can definitely shoot me a quick email. So it's kkirkwood@oseg.ca, so oseg.ca. But again, these are things that, again, like I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. So feel free, shoot me an ad, and I'll definitely answer any questions that you have. But as far as special projects go, I mean, there's a lot of really cool things that we have, kind of in limbo right now that we were going to work on with the local football scene. So, obviously we're kind of holding pattern on what that'll be. But once we get back to normal, then just stay tuned for a lot of these cool launches that we're going to be looking into with CAFA, high school, and make a couple of cool things with Football Canada as well.
Right on. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, and best of luck chasing those two little ones around the house there.
Yeah, you too, buddy. Thanks again for having me.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast network. Thanks very much for joining us this week. Huge shout out goes to Kyle Kirkwood for joining us and sharing his insights and his journey, not only through football, but through the sports industry, athletics in general, and sharing sort of what he sees as the future of not only football, but in sports moving forward in a post-COVID world here. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this with others. If there's anything that you guys can give us in terms of feedback, we'd love to hear it. Aside from that, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.